Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everybody who has joined the webinar, depending on where you are in the world. My name is John Taylor. I'm a director and principal of security here at Versa Networks. We're going to give everybody a couple minutes to file in, and then we'll go ahead and get the webinar started. For those of you who have already joined, a little bit of housekeeping rules. Number one is that everyone has been muted, so the presenter can get through everything. Number two is that there is a Q&A button up top, or there is a Q&A button for for you to be able to put in your any questions that you may have. We will try to get to as many questions as we can live, but with this being a demo, it can run full steam. So just so you know, if there is anything left over, we will be getting with you after the webinar and so forth, and we'll have details at that at the end. Once again, let's give everybody a couple minutes to file in, and then we'll go ahead and get this started. Thanks again. All right, and thank you everybody who has just joined the webinar. Once again, my name is John Taylor, Director and Principal of Security here at Versa Networks, and I'm joined by Maurice Landrum, one of our most senior security architects today. Once again, a little bit of housekeeping rules for those who have just joined. We will be trying to answer as many Q&A as we possibly can today, so please feel free, put your questions into the Q&A chat. Today's webinar is about advanced threat protection, and advanced threat protection has many different connotations. A lot of vendors will utilize advanced threat protection. They have different definitions, and so for that, a lot of my customers that I talk to actually ask me a lot of times, like, does ATP or advanced threat protection, is that sandboxing technologies? Is that things like URL prevent or URL filtering, AVAM? What does kind of consist of advanced threat? So today we're going to talk about what Versa actually considers advanced threat protection, and how we apply that within our SSE solution through our demo day. Maurice is going to go through a full demo of ATP, showcase, what it is, how it's configured, things of that nature as well, so you can actually see what our ATP solution does. With that, let's go ahead and get started. So first off, what I like to kind of go through is, and I love this slide more than anything else that's out there. Cyber attacks continue to get broader and deeper and more sophisticated than ever before. And this is what the crux of ATP really does bring for us within our SSE solution. And of course, with things like next-gen firewall and things of that nature as well. But I can remember a time way back in the day where one person, right, could not launch a single attack. It took 10 people to bring together a sophisticated attack. They launched it toward one particular corporation, or they launched it against maybe a group of corporations. Maybe they would do something that would be something more social engineering focused, try to do phishing attempts, things of that nature. But it took a lot of manpower to be able to do that. Now I can go out to the dark web. I can buy, some type of malware. I can buy a service that can deploy this over some type of proxy network, however that is. Short story is that as one person, I can now blast this out to hundreds and thousands of people, different corporations, organizations, however it is, and I can start wreaking havoc. So realistically, they have become broader. They're now deeper because we've been able to alter malware and alter hashes, and we can do things like polymorphic, or we can do masquerading. There's so many different things that we can do around that malware and that cyber attack today, that makes it more sophisticated than we've ever had. And so we need to have a solution that can help, right, especially from a technology perspective, be able to help security practitioners detect these sophisticated attacks, potential zero-day attacks, and so forth, and help block it or at least help alert on that and mitigate that as necessary. So realistically, once again, what is advanced threat protection? Well, from Versa, we categorize this as a category of security solutions that help organizations protect against advanced cyber attacks and malware. Now, when I talk about that, like I said, a lot of other vendors may classify this as URL filtering combined with AV and AM and things of that nature. Versa takes a little bit of a unique approach on that. But the one thing that we definitely want to drive home is, what can ATP really do or really help organizations with? Well, primarily, it's a stay ahead of cyber criminals by identifying and preventing, right? We want to make sure that we're preventing threats, right? And by predicting different attack vectors. This can come in with multiple things like, once again, masquerading of files, right? Things of that nature, insider threats, right? Stuff like that. We want to make sure that we can actually predict this, we can see it, we can prevent it in some way. And that's what ATP from Versa helps us do. So, what does our ATP solution really look like? Well, it's kind of easy. We use a multi-layer approach for known and unknown threats. Well, what does that mean, right? Everyone's going to say, hey, everyone uses something that's multi-layered. What does your solution do? Well, first off, we're not just looking at things like URL filtering or something of that nature. We really have built a solution that gives us the ability, number one, to do static analysis. So we can utilize a cloud AV engine, right? And there's multiple different AV engines, not just threat feeds, but we actually utilize the engine itself, the actual software to scan different files. We can also do things like cloud lookups, right? And I'll actually get through how this is layered, on top of each other with our SSE solution in the next slide. But understand, when we're looking at cloud lookup, we're looking at one of the largest databases that's out there in the world today to understand if there might be a bad file hash or something like that. We can also do metadata analysis, right? With the heuristics engine to go along with that, the numbers to once again help create a confidence score on whether or not this is good or bad, malicious, benign, right, or anything of that nature. We have an AI ML engine that's built in with this. So upon all of that stuff, we can start doing predictive analysis to be able to anticipate and mitigate the emerging threats that are out there. And lastly, if all else fails, we can do dynamic analysis. So this is where sandboxing comes in. As I said before, a lot of customers ask me, hey, a lot of people say ATP is their sandboxing solution. We took sandboxing and basically took it a step further to be able to help increase our efficacy going forward on how we've been able to build this solution. But multiple sandbox engines for enhanced efficacy. It also helps classify files based on behavior to identify potential zero-day malware as malicious, right? So at least it kind of gives us that confidence score. And if it can't determine if it's malicious, it might even call it suspicious, flag it, send it to your SIM, show it in our interface, and actually have someone from a SOC or a security analyst be able to put eyes on it, tear that apart, and actually understand what's going on with that file. So a little bit of how this is actually layered on top of each other and how this actually works, right? And then, like I said, Maurice is going to take you through the solution and allow you to see it firsthand. So first off, right, we already know that we're already employing, firewall, IP, maybe DNS filtering, URL filtering, and so forth. These are classic, baseline services that should be in any firewall. They should be in any SSE service, right? Moving forward. We're also looking at things like DPI, malware or anti-malware, file filtering, and employing our IPS. This from Versa, right, is what we know as our secure web gateway delivered with firewall as a service, zero trust network access, intrusion prevention systems, and more. This is the baseline, right, of anything that we should be getting. Upon that, right, this is where we start bringing in ATP. This is how we've layered that on top. So if something from a static definition, right, on box can't necessarily say that this is, malicious or benign, or it may be something that is, that looks suspicious, right, in some way, we'll send that up to the cloud lookup, right? So this is where we can do static analysis. We've partnered with VirusTotal, who is owned by Mandiant, right? The largest, red team, blue team IR provider that's out there. So they have the largest database of known bad file hashes in the real world. So we've been able to partner with them to do cloud lookups to say, is this something that is potentially bad? Is this something that is known? Keep in mind, if we're looking at things that are masquerading or something like that, once again, we can actually see the masquerade, see the original file that's there, and still check that against that bad file hash. While we're doing cloud lookup, we're also looking at the metadata attribute checks with it as well. Above and beyond that, right, we're employing multiple different AVs, right? So we're actually utilizing, once again, those engines. We're not just looking at it from a threat feed perspective and then trying to use that with our own AV engine or something of that nature. We're actually sending this through. So as these multiple AV engines are actually scanning said file, there is a possibility that we can look at and say, okay, is there 3 out of 5 AV engines? Is it, 2 out of 4? Is it, 1 out of 8? However that is, is something going to catch it as potentially malicious? And can we derive a confidence score on whether it's malicious, suspicious, or even if it's a clean file? With that, we utilize our AI ML predictive analysis that goes along with that. It's a non-signature based AI ML model, right, that we actually employ and we've built to be able to take all of this information, once again, derive that confidence score and predict that attack vector if we can find it, right, once again, through the cloud lookup all the way through the multi-AV. If we can't, if we don't have enough information for that, then we'll send it to our dynamic analysis sandbox, right, where we'll actually detonate the file, and then we can utilize everything that you see below this to say, okay, is this something good? Is it bad? Is it going to a known bad URL? Is it going to, is it actually a, once we detonated it, was it something that truly was masquerading and we couldn't see through things like metadata and so forth? Is this something that is absolutely horrible, and how do we mitigate that? That right there is what Versa knows as advanced threat protection. Those cloud lookups through the AI/ML analysis helps us increase our efficacy. It also helps us increase our speed on whether or not we're getting something back from the from our advanced security cloud to say, look, is it something that absolutely is known? So therefore, we're not just sending it to a sandbox to begin with and then detonating it and hoping, right? Because once we send it to a sandbox and detonate, that usually means we're looking for a 0-day. So we're not hoping that everything that we send there comes back, right, as something that is known. So we're actually able to see those known hashes or see those known bad files, protect you against that. Once again, if we can't protect you against something that is there because we don't know it or the solutions don't know it, send it to the sandbox, analyze it, and see if it's a 0-day. With that, once again, all right, I do also want to say that that does require TLS decryption, and Maurice will go over some of that stuff. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and kick this over to Maurice. Maurice, how about we show the group that's here today, what ATP is, how it works, how to configure it, and things like that. Maurice, the floor is yours.
All right, John, thank you for that introduction there. Let me go ahead and share my screen. We're going to jump directly into the advanced threat protection. And once again, my name is Maurice Landrum, Senior Security Architect with Versa Networks. All right, let's jump right in. So firstly, before we go into any demos, it's good to just kind of know the understanding of how it's configured, how to set it up, and what our topology is. So the topology that we're going to be displaying today is here we have Versa Secure Access Client 2 here on the screen, and also we have 3 gateways: San Jose, Ashburn, and Norway. We'll likely be using San Jose because it's closer to the client that I'll be utilizing, and we're going to transfer a quick file. All right, so firstly here under the portal that you see here, this is actually our Concerto portal. The Concerto is a orchestrator that orchestrates all the configuration down through our controllers. If you're not familiar with our architecture, so we have an orchestrator, then from there we have a controller, and then through that controller we have VOS, or Versa Operating System, which also is our Versa cloud gateways. So through this UI is where all the configuration happens. Very simple, sleek, easy to configure. So here we see the configuration tab. It starts off with a security services edge, then moves on to secure SD-WAN, but today we'll be focusing on secure service edge. These two together does complement the SASE architecture that Versa supplies. Looking at this this tab is really clean. But first, before we can log into a gateway using the client, we first need to have some policy via secure access client to allow that user in. We won't go into this in depth, but just a quick view on what we'll be logging into using LDAP in this instance. So here you can see multiple views, finance users, NOC, default corp, and down below we have a dev and so on. So this particular policy just allows this is where your ZTNA policies is going to be, your device risk, whether we're securing that endpoint, how we're securing that endpoint, are we allowing certain endpoints to essentially stay on. So for example, you have Windows Defender or CrowdStrike sitting on that endpoint. Is that endpoint on? This goes into that layered security that John was just speaking about. So again, just wanted to give you a lay of the land on how this is set up. And then from there, we would need to set up a TLS decryption policy. And here, the policy that we'll be using, let me just go back here under profiles. So the profiles, we'll create a profile. And this profile just essentially states, hey, what we're inspecting, is it TLS 1.2, TLS 1.3, right? So on and so forth. And then moving over to the policy rules, this is where we actually attach those users. So under the user and group, I have specific users, although you can use groups, I just put it there for visibility. And then also moving over to, we can also add endpoint information profiles if we need it. Again, back to the layered security, but for this particular demo, we will be demoing just ATP just to show the efficacy of the solution. Then the configuration, the main configuration will be under the real-time protection rules. And under the real-time protection, we'll start with the profiles. So you navigate to profiles, and here we have a suite here of security features that you can use on the Versa platform that, again, makes up that layered security approach. And then we have our advanced threat protection. So firstly, we'll look at the global settings. Under the global settings, this is where kind of all of the magic happens first. We have a notification rule. This notification rule is simply for email notifications, whether it's a suspicious or whether the file is actually malicious, or whether you just want to see alerts on what's going on within your security solution. This is what this notification profile is. And before we go into the additional config, I'll kind of give you a quick view of the notification profile. Under the notification profile, we have one as default. I have my email here. And essentially what this states is the logic is notify after each event. So for this particular profile, I have to notify me whenever there's a malicious or suspicious file to come in. You can also, it's also granular where you can notify after a time interval, or you can simply select, hey, I don't want to be notified. Also with that, our email notifications is also can be customized as far as what you view within that email itself. Okay. And then moving up to going back to the profiles under advanced threat protection and then global settings, we have what we call a timeout action. So this is advising you, or this configuration is telling you, hey, what are we doing? What action are we taking if there is a timeout? So if there's a timeout, how long am I waiting? Am I waiting for 600 seconds, which, or am I waiting for 300 seconds? Now, one thing to take into account is when these files are being scanned, we always advise it could take up between 5 to 7 minutes. So you place this timeout to alert you if the file has been scanned, or if we were not able to determine a final verdict within that timeout, then we set some action. What are we doing? Are we alerting? Are we blocking? Are we rejecting? Then below we have our default ATP actions. What this dictates to the policies is, hey, what are we doing whether a file is clean, suspicious, or malicious? Are we blocking the file? If it's suspicious, are we alerting? So these are our defaults here, which is also configurable for the ATP actions for those profiles. And then under the profiles, you have a set of profiles that you create. And within each profile, you can also create additional rules. So I'll just open up this default block profile, which is the first one we'll take a look at. And under the default block profile, we have a select box where you can check if it's logging. So a quick understanding of our logging, we do have big analytics, which is called Versa analytics engine, which also allows us to send all of these threats. The threats that's coming from the gateways downstream are sent up to our big data analytics platform. And then from there, and it just back into the Concerto UI, which you can view those logs. Under the ATP rule, we support the protocol seen here. Today, we'll be focusing on HTTP only. And then also we support 90 plus file types within the solution. And we also support the transfer direction, whether it's download, upload, or download and upload. In this instance, we just have download. Again, going back to the layered solution, you might have our CASB solution that's integrated with this, which we do support. And you might have some application where you're not allowing upload. So at that point, for that particular application, you might not need to select the upload direction. You might only need download. So it's completely up to you. It's completely granular to where you can configure it. So then we have our pending ATP actions. So each action has a use case. So within our action, we're gonna default block any action first before we move on to scanning the file. So for example, so this is the pending block action. So the first thing we're gonna do is, let's say we have a client that's trying to download some file. The client is going to first attempt to download the file from the web server. And then from there, the web server is going to obviously send that file back. Now, since we do have SSL decrypt breaking the spec that's already on VOS, VOS is going to intercept that. When VOS intercepts that, we also take a copy. So we take that file, we take a copy, we place that in cache on VOS. And in addition to that, we're going to also take that copy of that file and we're going to export it to our ATP cloud service. And this is where the magic happens. From there, we're going to take that file and we're going to scan it through various what we call pipelines. We're going to scan it through various pipelines. So firstly, if it's caught on a cache hit, you immediately block, depending on your configuration, of course. So you'll be immediately blocked if it's a cache hit. If it's not a cache hit, then we'll move on to a static analysis, which we also have in our cloud of actual hashes. Not the file itself. We have just the metadata and the hash of the file. And then from there, if we're determined that, hey, you know what, this particular file is malicious, then we immediately advise VOS from the ATP cloud that this file is malicious. But let's say it's clean. If the file is clean, then we need to go through another pipeline. From there, we move to that additional pipeline, and that will be from our static analysis to our multi-AV. We partner with multiple third-party AV engines, which you'll see later within one of our reports. And then from there, we'll take that file, we'll scan through the multi-AV, and if it turns up malicious, we immediately advise VOS that this file is malicious. Now, if that determined to be, hey, you know, we check the static, we check the cache, we check the metadata, we checked all of these parameters, and then from there, we can move on to detonate that file if all of the pipelines final verdict was determined to be clean. And then from there, we'll turn back the final verdict, whether it's clean or if it's determined to be malicious. All right, so after that file has been blocked, the user will see a notification via the machine that they're on the right, where it says, hey, you're blocked. Again, just to reiterate, the first file, the first download of that file, even if it's clean or malicious, if you have this configuration set to block, then we will block the foul the first time. Each and every subsequent time, if the foul has been determined clean, then we will allow the foul. Okay, and the second, let me just jump here. The second parameter that we have is default timeout. The default timeout, what that essentially states is if you're downloading a file or uploading, depending on the direction that you have chosen. So if you're downloading that file and you have wait until timeout set, then what we'll do is we'll hold the last packet on VOS until we determine if that file is malicious or clean. If the file is determined to be clean, then we'll allow that file. If the file is determined to be malicious on the final verdict, then the file is not allowed to be downloaded. Each subsequent download or upload of that file, if it has been determined to be malicious, will be blocked. Of course, if it's determined to be clean, then the file will be allowed. So let me just give you a quick pictorial of the wait until timeout. And from the wait until timeout, the user attempts to download a file. From there, the web server, of course, sends that file back to VOS. We take that same copy, we export it to ATP, and we hold that packet until we determine what that file is. Is it malicious? Is it clean? And we wait that time. Now, again, that falls back into that timeout value that I just showed previously under the global settings. This timeout value here, if we were not able to determine within this time limit that the file was either malicious or clean, for that matter, then we send an alert, or we can block the file. It totally depends on your configuration. Okay, and then the third value that we have is allow. So the allow, which we have a default allow here, what this essentially states is, hey, we're going to allow and scan the first time, and the file that whatever direction that you're downloading or uploading, we will allow you to actually download that file or upload that file to its destination while we're scanning. Now, there's a lot of different scenarios why you might want to have this. One of them being that, hey, you might trust that application. That application might be your application, and you know what items are on that particular application or what files are there. From there, you might want to allow it the first time just for user experience or just for testing purposes. And then each subsequent time, you will block that file if it's determined to be malicious. Okay. All right. So with that, I'm going to take a look at the rule. So these are the profiles. There's the global settings, the profiles, the rules within the profiles for ATP. And then moving on to the internet protection rule, which is where you would attach the profile. So we're going to look at the first rule here, which is finance. So we have a couple users here that's under the finance group. And we're going to skip some of these, and we're going to jump directly to the security enforcement. And this is where you would attach the default block or whatever profile that you choose to attach to this particular rule. And again, if you look here, you can see that it's very granular to where you can set it up to where certain groups, we support SAML authentication as well, LDAP, Versa directory, which is local, and radius as well. So you can set this up with a mix and match. And then you can also tie additional parameters to it, such as our URL filtering, our file filtering, our AV, IPS, IDS as well. So all of that can be layered because you want to catch that threat first. You don't want to wait. So if we have a file that can be caught on our AV, you want to catch it on the AV. Okay. So let's move over to the demo here. So I have a client machine sitting on Windows. This client has been connected for about an hour or so, and he's connected to the San Jose gateway. the first check is because, look, we must do the break and inspect, right? We need to be able to extract the information directly out of that file in order to determine whether it's malicious or not. And so here we have a CA that has been issued by VOS certificate. So we're good there. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to try to download the file. I'm logged into box.com here. We have a bunch of files here. I'm going to go ahead and try and download this file and see what happens. So as you can see, there was a violation. This file was actually blocked. Now, again, remember, we have for this particular rule blocked the first time. Now, was it a cache file? Was it a malicious file immediately? We need to check in the logs. So let's go and check the logs here under analytics. And then within our analytics, we'll select the right org. And then we'll go take a look at the logs directly first. Then we'll look at the overview. So within our logs here, we see immediately that that is the file name. As you can see, I did download that file previously, right? And so this is likely a cached hit. And then we can scroll over. We see we have our IP addresses. You have the rule name. Again, this rule name can be anything. That's not the profile name. It's the rule name. Gives you your source address, destination address, source port, etc. All the information you need to determine, who, what, when, right? For that particular action there. So here you see that it is a cache hit. So this file was cached on VOS or Versa operating system. So we already knew about the file and it was immediately blocked. Let's try another file. Let's see, let's go over here and back out. Let's go to ATP. And let's try and download this file. So of course, immediately we see a block. Now, again, we have 5 to 7 minutes to see if this particular file has been clean, malicious, blocked. We don't know. And this is the power of the solution, right? We send it through those pipelines to determine if that file is in fact malicious. So let's go and we'll have a little bit of a waiting time here. Let's see. And in between waiting, what I'll do is show you the report of the board file that we downloaded there. Okay, so here, the previous file that we did download was this board C55 exe file. We determined through our multi-AV that it was foul. But if you noticed that the multi-AV was malicious, but the static showed up clean. So with that, this solution will in fact work for you where you need to send it through those multiple antivirus engines in order to determine if it's clean or not. Also notice here, based on the colors here, where you have green if we determined if it was clean, and then red determined if it was malicious. So here you see that Avast and Microsoft did determine that this file was malicious. And this is where you would need that multi-AV engine to help you determine if the file is malicious or not. So let's see if we come back, because this is a live demo, right? We don't know, again, it's 5 to 7 minutes to determine if the file is malicious or not. And then from there, we come back to the analytics to check. Let's see. Okay, so here's a pipeline. So this is interesting, right? So here you see, if you look at the pipeline, so just going back, each one of these are different pipelines, right? So you see here that it is, we did a lock and scan the first time. Then we went through and we did a cloud lookup. And then we sent it to our AI ML for analysis, okay? It came back unknown. Now, here in each one of these pipelines, first we blocked it, we sent it to the sandbox, and then we allowed it because it came back. Now, as you can see, there's another pipeline that has come in during that time. And this is saying to allow as well. So it checked the metadata and it came back and it said, hey, to allow that file. And we can see that here, right, from our static analysis. We also have during the wait until timeout. But before we go into the wait and timeout, I wanted to give you a quick view of our threat overview here. So these are the pipelines or stages, if you will, that you can view on, hey, what are my top hits, right? What do I have, right? Is it cow lookup, AIML, metadata, etc., right? So as you can see, based on the files that I've been downloading, it's only 4 hits, so they're going to be exact. Here we have 6 hits because I was likely testing earlier. And this determines, at a high level, how many threats do you have in your organization? Do you need to take any action? Do we need to roll back and say, hey, maybe we need to have that block first time. Maybe we don't need timeout. It totally depends on your organization's requirements. And then here you can drill down here. And within drilling down, you can see that we have certain events that came through. It shows you sort of that hierarchy, right? Your trending aspects of the AIML. And then below here, it does jump back into the original logs. So it's very powerful when you can drill down directly into the analytics and then jumping back over to the threat detection and ATP. And then if you drill down a bit more, oh, it came back. So here we go. So again, right? You have that 5 to 7 minute wait time that you have to be cognizant about because you don't know. You have to allow the engines to go through and take that file and take a look. So multi-AV actually caught it and it came back malicious. So this was actually sent through all of our pipelines and came back determined to be malicious. And then if we come and we check this, it takes a little while because this report is we're actually pulling the report directly from the ATP cloud to retrieve this report. So it's not local. And then we came back. Look at this. Wow. All of the engines actually caught this as almost all. One guy here did not catch it, but for the most part, we knew that file was malicious. And one more thing here, if we go and we drill down a bit here, if we click this little plus button here, right, we can see the full flow of that log or logs, if you will, for that same action. So now we have to take a step back here and look a little bit deeper so that we can see, see this log below here, we have SSE web log. So that is related to ATP, but we actually need to allow, if you see over here, we need to allow this SASE web log or through our web interface, through our secure web gateway or the through the gateway itself, internet egress, that needs to be allowed first. So we allow that and we log it. So that's allowed first. That was able to get to the box.com. And then on the access log, this is your security log. So we also log in a security log. So if you have external SIM or some external log collector that you need to collect these logs, we also can take the logs and feed it into your system for analysis and remediation as well. So that's your access log. Then from there, you have CGNAT log. We're showing you that, hey, this log is being natted. We move up to our sandbox log. But if you see here, we also have items such as, hey, what is my notification profile, right? We're looking deeper, a little bit deeper into this log. I'm kind of highlighting here so you can see it. What is our action? Was it sandbox block and allow, allow and scan first? Was it wait until timeout, right? That information is going to show up here and it's telling you exactly what's happening. And in addition to that, you have your file hash. Right? Your file hash is important. So we know that file hash. Again, we take that file hash and we cache that on VOS itself so that any subsequent downloads or file transfers through VOS will be caught based on that cache. And then we move a little bit more. This is your pipelines, right? So we see that we did a cloud lookup. The analysis was static, right? And we came through and we set that as an allow because we didn't catch it on the static analysis, right? And then we move over to even the file filtering, right? Again, going back to that layered security approach, right? If you had a file filtering created, of course, it's out of the scope of this demo, but file filtering, you enable that along with the ATP solution so that you can have that full efficacy there. And then we have some additional logs here. And finally, we have our malicious analysis here based on what our multi-AV pipeline has caught. Okay. The next action here, right, is the, let's go through here. I'll allow first time on first scan, just to give you a quick pictorial view on how it's done. Pretty similar, right? You attempt to transfer the file. Ross sees that file. Same thing. We export that file to our cloud. We do an analysis on it. We do a static lookup. We go through the multi-AV engine, the metadata, and finally, if the file is determined that every pipeline is clean except for sandboxing, then we detonate that file within the sandbox itself. And then on first scan, we do allow that file to reach the endpoint the first time, and any subsequent transfer is blocked. Okay. So with that, I think, John, we can open it up for Q&A here.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So one of the questions that's actually in the chat right now is, visibility looks great, but, getting these logs into our SIM is completely paramount. So what does it take to get these logs into our SIM, especially if our source solution or something like that is going to take, action against this? What's that process? How long do we have to wait? Is it something that's instantaneous? Is it something that's delayed? Right. What does that actually look like, right, going forward?
That's actually a great question. So, so with this solution, right, we also allow from our analytics where you can export those logs via either set format or syslog directly into your SIM solution. Now, if your SIM solution is publicly facing, that's fine. That's great. We just send it directly, make sure it's secure with TLS, of course, and send those logs directly to you. However, if your SIM solution is internal, well, we'll work out some things, build an IPsec tunnel back to where it needs to go so that we can have secure transport back into your SIM solution.
Awesome. So one of the other questions that is there is, like, we talked about the 5 to 7 minutes, right, to have this actually scan and come back as something potentially malicious and so forth. Is this for, every file, right? Even if it's known as malicious, like, if we find something that is malicious on first shot, do we still have to wait 5 to 7 minutes, especially with that cloud lookup, things of that nature as well? Or is this more for, waiting till the end of said pipelines, right? Like you talked about, to actually come back as something? Like, do we have to wait for everything? I think is what the question is actually asking, for it to be deemed as malicious, or is it caught as malicious and then we're automatically block it?
Well, it's a good question. So, so there's a couple points to this question, right? So the first thing is it's configurable to have it blocked the first time to ensure that, hey, I don't want anything malicious. I don't want to download that file into my environment. I want to first determine if it's malicious before that file is placed into my environment. So you block it first. So yes, you can block it initially. And then each subsequent, if it is determined to be malicious, we will block as well. Now, if it's determined to be clean, then we will allow that file. Now, going back to every time, yes, if you have this enabled, it depends on the file size, right? So of course, we have to take that file. We have to place it onto VOS. We have to export it to the cloud, right? So yes, there's a time difference there, and then we have to send those files to the multi-AV engines for scanning. So yes, there is a time limit. Now, again, it's 5 to 7 minutes. Now, if you set a timeout based on what we viewed previously, if you go here and you needed to set a timeout, you can set a lower timeout and you can alert yourself immediately. Hey, you know what? This time just doesn't work for me. I need to know at the 5 minute mark. That's fine. But just know that this is not a set and done type of configuration when you first set in your environment. This is something that you kind of set it for the, first couple of testing periods, right? And then once you find that sweet spot, you'll know, depending on the files that you are typically transforming within your environment.
So let's take, for instance, right, that we've already downloaded a file. We've already determined that that file is malicious in some way. We go and we download that file again. So we already know it's there. We've already scanned it and so forth. Does the ATP solution develop a like a signature or something like that, that if we see this exact same file again, try to come around, that it's instantly blocked? Or do we have to wait yet once again for a for that file to be scanned, right? This is just for something that is actually known, right? We've already scanned this and determined it. Like, what's the process going forward after that?
Yeah, okay. All good questions here. So the within VOS, right, there's a caching mechanism for these files. So as soon as the file is determined to be malicious, that information is sent to the Versa operating system, or your gateway in this instance, and it's cached. So now we know what that file hash is. We know exactly what it is. So when the next user comes in, they try to download this or transfer this file. From there, it will be blocked immediately because it is known to be malicious.
Awesome. So we got two more, right? The first one is that, we talked about like where to apply the rules, right? You're talking about the internet protection rules and things like that. Is this a blanket policy that goes over all internet protection rules, or is it something that we turn on per rule, right? Do we whitelist, like, just in case we want to be able to download something from a particular site and so forth? Like, how do we have that come through and not necessarily be scanned from trusted, like maybe my Dropbox or maybe my OneDrive or something of that nature?
Right. So you can, under the internet protection policies, we're very, very granular. We're in the fact that, hey, you can also create a rule. So let's say you had some admins. You know that those admins are accessing that particular application. You will match on that application and that group or users that need access to the application, and simply don't allow or don't set the ATP policy for that particular rule, essentially whitelisting those user groups. Or we can do it by IP address, geolocation. You can do it by port. It's very, very powerful to where you can control it. URL categories, reputations, etc.
Awesome. Just had another one come in too, so we still have two more. I think this one's more important than the last one I was going to give you. Let's say the customer has a SOC, right, or a security threat hunting team built into their environment. They get unfettered access to the web, right? So we're not necessarily just looking at it from an application standpoint, we're looking at it from a user standpoint. So can we still, within that internet protection rule, write a rules for specific users, to say they can go download whatever they want to in a closed environment for a machine, right? Because you talked about that zero trust, network access side. Like, can we define that machine, define that user, and give them only the required access to download what they deem as malicious, files and so forth, to do threat hunting, and whatnot, to potentially find their own 0 days, or however that works.
So that's a multi-question there. Now, so there's various ways that we can accomplish this. First, we do have our endpoint information profiles, wherein we can set a rule and we can look for certain parameters. Like maybe you have a file, maybe you have a certificate, right, to identify that particular user, right? And just give you an example. You can look at that particular certificate, and from there, that user, in combination with that certificate and that application, can be whitelisted as per our rule engine. So these rules are read from top down, and from there it's very granular to where you can set what you need to allow whitelisting for your SOC.
Awesome. I think the last one's in there is, of course, we all want to know this. What's versus best practices, right? Everyone has their own best practice on whether or not they should block, allow, right? Do they wait? Like, what does Versa actually recommend? As a best practice, from get go, and then how do you adjust that based upon a customer's need to potentially say, I want to be able to implement this. I don't want to basically hinder, right, or something of that nature from a customer standpoint or customer experience standpoint. Like, how do we go about that, right, from a company standpoint?
So with anything where if you do not trust or you don't know the destination or the application that you are accessing, you should block, right? That's first. Now, from a user experience, if for a user experience, you know exactly what that application is, it's your day-to-day, you manage it, or you have some third party pipe directly into that application, then you can set and allow on first scan. That's totally up to the organization, but typically you want to mitigate all threats within the environment. So by default, you might want to block any file download. Now, again, you going back to user experience. If you have many users and you just don't know and you're in your testing phase, you can go ahead and you can allow.
Awesome. I think that ends just about every single question that we have in the Q&A. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this off. So I'm going to go ahead and replace the current share from you, Maurice.
All right.
All right. So first off, right, once again, thanks for everybody for joining. We really do appreciate it. ATP once again can become a cornerstone in what users will or organizations will use to be able to find their 0 days, and to be able to have deeper intel, right, on files and so forth that are being downloaded. There's a lot of other things our SSE solution can do as well. It's not just ATP, like you saw that with the initial build. So keep in mind, we do support things like CASB, DLP. We also have our URL filtering, our next gen firewall, things of that nature that are built into the solution above and beyond what ATP does. We do all of our ZTNA right here at Versa through our SSE solution. We have a SASE client that gives us posture awareness and connectivity, and it integrates with your existing, authentication infrastructure as well. It's all cloud delivered at that point too. And that management, as Maurice was showing you, is done through Concerto. So we do have that single point of policy and control, for on and off-site users as well. So once again, take a look at what we're doing from an SSE, not just from ATP. See the entire product. What I will say is go to versanetworks.com. Hit the get a demo button up in the upper right hand corner. This does require you, of course, to put your first and last name, work email, and so forth in. We want to make sure that we're getting your account executive that is over your account there, as well as your SE. The product demo side, you can click on that. It will drop down. There's many different things within SSE that you can tailor that to, or you can see the overall use of the product. Right. Once again, SSE is part of the Versa One Universal SASE platform. We have just recently announced the Universal SASE platform. So if you want to see how our SD-WAN can connect into this, things like SD-LAN, our next-gen firewall on-prem, not just our SSE side, once again, you can get a demo of all of this stuff. But go out, take a look, see what Versa is doing in the SSE realm, get a demo of our SSE, look and see what our ATP solution has the ability to do. Even go further, get a POC, right? And actually see this with your live data. We're more than happy to do so. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close this out. Maurice, any words of wisdom from you before we exit out through the of the webinar?
Yeah. Thanks, John. So I think you'll see that the Versa solution is definitely a robust security solution, especially with that layered approach. Come check us out, and like JT said, you can go ahead and request that free demo. Thanks, John.
Thank you. I'm going to leave the webinar open for a couple of minutes just for anyone who wants to put any other Q&A. Keep in mind, right, we will be getting back to you, after this if you do have Q&A that we didn't talk about live. Unfortunately, with the holiday season that is rapidly approaching, we will be getting back to you after the holiday season. So once again, if you do have any other Q&A, please drop it in there. We'll leave the webinar open for a couple of minutes for anyone to drop some of that stuff in. We will be responding back to you, once again, after the holiday season. With that, thanks everybody for your time. Really do appreciate it. Hope this webinar was worthwhile.